European ambassadors to meet on Wednesday after Viktor Orban visits Russia and China.
Ukraine and Poland have signed an unprecedented military agreement.
Relief in Brussels as France avoids a far-right government. But what could the election outcome mean for the European Union?
Ukraine and Poland have committed to firming up security cooperation by implementing a raft of new measures. Kyiv will shoot down Poland-bound Russian missiles and Warsaw will train Ukrainian soldiers, according to a social media post by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
My Polacy pomagamy Ukrainie zarówno ze względu na naszą przyjaźń i solidarność, ale też ze względu na własny, dobrze pojęty interes. Kto dzisiaj broni Ukrainę, broni także siebie. I w Polsce te słowa mają szczególne znaczenie. Dlatego to jest być może nawet najlepszą gwarancją naszej współpracy na rzecz bezpieczeństwa, bo dzisiaj mamy wspólny program, wspólny projekt, bo nasze bezpieczeństwo jest wspólne.
The news comes a day before NATO leaders are scheduled to meet in Washington. They are expected to discuss long-term security aid and military support for Ukraine 2 years after Russia's full-scale invasion. Meanwhile, the recently formed Dutch government have ramped up its support for the war-torn country, stating it will supply Ukraine F-16 aircrafts. Outgoing Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte will start his job as NATO Secretary-General in October.
At least 31 people have been killed in one of Russia's largest barrage of missile attacks over Ukraine in the past few months. The strike wounded more than 153 people and largely destroyed the main children's hospital in Kyiv, which Ukrainian officials have defined as a war crime. Russia claims the damage to the hospital happened following a failure from a Ukrainian defense system. But Zelensky firmly rejects Moscow's allegations.
Вже зараз, якщо ти чув сигнали, що це працювало українське ППО, що це українське ППО, а не їх розрахований удар. Я вдячний всім українцям, які почали викладувати відео, де видно, конкретно видно не частину тієї чи іншої ракети, а прямий ракетний удар, яким було поранено і вбито багато людей в Україні сьогодні.
Zelensky said he will be calling for a UN Security Council emergency meeting, whilst the spokesperson for the UN Secretary-General strongly condemned the attack. More than 40 missiles of different types, including hypersonic Kinzels, reportedly hit apartment buildings and public infrastructure across 5 different cities.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has arrived in Beijing on Monday in a surprise visit. His trip follows an unexpected visit to Russia last week, where he proposed that Ukraine should consider agreeing to an immediate ceasefire with Russia. Diplomatic sources say that Orban has caused concerns over deliberately displaying the logo of the EU rotating presidency in his communications, instead of making it clear that he is representing his own country. The Hungarian Prime Minister is widely seen as having a close relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
What we see is a strategic campaign to ridicule the European Union and to demonstrate that actually Prime Minister Orban can go on with all of these uncoordinated steps, which are clear violations of joint and agreed EU positions, and does not need to fear any negative consequences. Because he knows that with this, on the one hand, he also expands his future future space to maneuver and future political autonomy, but also that seriously undermines the perception of the EU foreign policy among key partners.
Experts say that despite Orban's efforts, they are unlikely to have any tangible impact on a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine.
I think Prime Minister Orban is the only European head of state or government who is ready to talk to Mr. Putin and actually violate the basic principle jointly established by EU member states, that there is no talk about Ukraine without Ukraine. So it's not the ability, it's just the readiness. I don't see any positive contribution of this sort of traveling diplomacy to the solution of the war in Ukraine, because that would require the involvement of all partners.
European ambassadors will discuss Orban's recent visits in a meeting on Wednesday.
French President Emmanuel Macron has refused to accept the resignation of the country's Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, asking him on Monday to remain temporarily as the head of the government. Whilst Attal announced his resignation on Sunday, he reminded the three major risks the French faced.
Mon engagement dans cette campagne était pour moi un devoir. Dès le début de cette campagne, j'ai alerté sur trois risques. Le risque d'une majorité absolue dominée par la France insoumise, le risque d'une majorité absolue dominée par le Rassemblement national et le risque d'une disparition du mouvement qui incarne nos idées et nos valeurs. Ces trois risques, aujourd'hui, ont été écartés par les Français.
Election results showed just over 180 seats for the New Popular Front leftist coalition, more than 160 seats for Macron's centrist alliance, and Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally with more than 140, keeping the far-right away from power. 289 seats are needed to control the 577-seat National Assembly. Modern France has never experienced a parliament with no dominant party.
A sigh of relief in Brussels. The far right did not sweep to power in the French legislative elections. The presidential party of Emmanuel Macron has avoided humiliation by finishing in second place. It means relative stability for the European Union. While Macron could still face political chaos at home, analysts say he should be able to retain his influence in Brussels.
Macron surtout va devoir faire attention à ses équilibres en interne et peut-être se concentrer un peu plus sur la politique intérieure que sur celle européenne ou extérieure. Mais tout compte fait, il sera moins affaibli de ce qu'on s'attendait et le rôle de la France pourra continuer à être exercé avec une certaine panache comme il l'a fait jusqu'à présent.
The left-wing New Popular Front pulled off a shock victory and says it now should be able to nominate a prime minister. Certain aspects of its programme, such as lowering retirement age to 60 and increasing the minimum wage to €1,600 a month, worry some in Brussels. The measures could run counter to European treaties, which limit a member state's public deficit to 3% of its gross domestic product.
Si on devait suivre les positions électorales qui ont été faites de part et d'autre, il y aurait un sérieux problème avec la dette et donc pour tout le système euro.
Ça va générer une crainte, mais attention, l'Union européenne peut elle aussi barrer la route. On sait très bien que des gouvernements qui étaient arrivés avec des projets très ambitieux ont été obligés, avec la réalité européenne, de mettre de l'eau dans leur vin.
The left-wing New Popular Front includes parties from across the left side of the political spectrum. They will need to consolidate their position on support for Ukraine if they are to govern, analysts say.
Le PS, et je pense notamment à la figure de Raphaël Glucksmann, qui est évidemment, comme on le sait, un très grand soutien à l'Ukraine, fera en sorte de tempérer peut-être les discours de LFI. Et je pense qu'il y a un tel consensus tout de même à l'intérieur du pays autour d'un soutien à l'Ukraine et de défendre les valeurs de la démocratie contre un pays agressif et tyrannique. Je pense qu'il serait difficile tout de même pour LFI de tenir une position au sein d'un gouvernement qui remettrait en cause le soutien de la France à l'Ukraine.
Kyiv will likely look to November's US presidential election and a potential Trump return as a bigger threat to its military aid from the West.
Almost 30 bears from the Transfagarashan mountain will be relocated to the Zarnești sanctuary. The authorities' decision comes after a Euronews Romania report last week. Euronews Romania correspondent Maya Bondic reports.
În urmă cu o săptămână eram aici, în zona Transfăgărășan, Vidraru, și pe întreg traseul am văzut urși cerșind mâncare la stradă. Acum ne-am reîntors în teren cu ministrul mediului pentru a vedea ce soluții există pentru acești urși.
The Minister for the Environment told Euronews that he will issue a ministerial order or even change the legislation to solve the dangerous situation in the area.
Împreună cu administratorul drumului național, respectiv CNAIR-ul, probabil că am putea să aducem la cunoștința oamenilor că hrănirea urșilor este interzisă, că hrănirea urșilor poate fi sancționată cu amendă.
Care mocnește și, Doamne ferește, să se întâmple o nenorocire. Împreună cu Comisia și cu reprezentanții instituțiilor care fac parte din Comisie, am ajuns la concluzia cu toții că ei trebuie relocați.
Local authorities have identified 26 bears roaming the streets. Due to feeding by tourists, the bears are no longer used to foraging for themselves. The food offered by tourists on the street seems to be their favorite.